Across the galaxy, whispers travel faster than light itself. They speak of a species so relentless that entire star systems have fallen silent at their approach. They tell of beings who laugh in the face of impossible odds, who turn certain death into stunning victory with nothing but crude determination and an inexplicable refusal to surrender. The Galactic Council has spent millennia cataloging the rise and fall of civilizations, but nothing in their vast archives prepared them for humanity. When the Zephyrian Empire stretched across 1,000 worlds, their queen believed herself untouchable. Her fleets had crushed rebellions, her technology had evolved beyond mortal comprehension, and her psychic abilities could bend reality itself. She ruled from her crystalline throne with the absolute certainty that no force in the universe could challenge her dominion. She was wrong. Now, as alarms scream through her palace corridors and her greatest warriors fall like wheat before the scythe, Queen Vexhari learns what every other alien ruler has discovered too late: humanity doesn't just fight wars, they rewrite the very definition of warfare. And, when they set their sights on liberation, empires that have stood for eons crumble like ancient dust. This is the story of how one human changed everything. This is the chronicle of why, across the galaxy, mothers now whisper to their children, "Beware the human who smiles before battle, for they know something the universe has forgotten, that legends are not born, they are forged in the fires of impossible defiance." The mining ship Perseverance had been humanity's farthest venture into the Outer Rim territories when the Zephyrian Patrol found it. Captain Marcus Chen remembered the moment with crystal clarity: how the sleek, obsidian vessels had emerged from hyperspace like predatory sharks sensing blood in cosmic waters. His crew of 43 had fought valiantly, but mining equipment made poor weapons against military-grade plasma cannons. Now, 3 months later, Chen found himself in the holding cells beneath the Zephyrian Imperial Palace, watching his fellow humans through electromagnetic bars that hummed with lethal energy. The Zephyrians had kept them alive for a reason, though none could guess why. The alien empire had a reputation for swift execution of captured enemies, not prolonged imprisonment. The cell block stretched for nearly 100 meters, carved from some kind of luminescent stone that cast everything in an eerie blue glow. Chen counted 47 humans in various states of despair and defiance. Some were from his crew, others had been captured in different raids across human space. The Zephyrians, it seemed, were collecting them like specimens. "Captain," whispered Lieutenant Sarah Martinez from the adjacent cell. She had been his communications officer aboard the Perseverance, a young woman with fire in her eyes that 3 months of captivity hadn't dimmed. "Did you hear what the guards were saying earlier?" Chen pressed closer to the energy barrier that separated them. The Zephyrians spoke in a melodic language that sounded like wind chimes in a storm, but several humans had begun picking up fragments during their imprisonment. "What did you catch?" "Something about a demonstration. They keep mentioning the Queen and tomorrow's ceremony." Martinez glanced toward the far end of the cell block where 2 Zephyrian guards stood motionless. The aliens were tall and willowy, with pale blue skin and eyes like liquid silver. Their movements were so graceful they seemed to glide rather than walk. "I think they're planning to execute some of us as entertainment." The thought sent ice through Chen's veins. The Zephyrian Empire was known for its elaborate public spectacles, often involving the gruesome deaths of captured enemies. Their queen, Vexhari the Eternal, was said to derive psychic energy from suffering and terror. It would explain why they had been kept alive. Fresh fear was apparently more potent than stale despair. "We need to warn the others," Chen murmured, but Martinez shook her head. "Everyone already knows, Captain. Word travels fast in here." She gestured to the other cells where humans sat in small groups, their voices low but urgent. Plans were being made, escape routes discussed, even though the barriers made communication difficult and cooperation nearly impossible. Chen studied their prison more carefully. The Zephyrians were advanced far beyond human technology, but they had one critical weakness: they underestimated human ingenuity. The energy barriers were designed to contain beings with the aliens' graceful, measured movements. They hadn't accounted for human desperation and creativity. In the cell across from Martinez, Dr. Elena Vasquez was examining the base of her containment field with the focused intensity that had made her one of humanity's premier xenogeologists. She had been studying mineral samples on Kepler 442b when the Zephyrians raided the research station. Now she was putting that same analytical mind to work on their prison. "The power coupling runs through the floor," she called softly to Chen. If we could create a surge in multiple cells simultaneously, we might overload the local grid. With what? Asked Sergeant Mike Torres from the cell next to hers. The former Marine had been part of the Perseverance's security detail. We don't exactly have access to explosives down here. Dr. Vasquez smiled grimly. Human body. Specifically, the electrical impulses in our nervous systems. If enough of us grabbed the barriers at exactly the same moment, the feedback might be sufficient to cause a cascade failure. That would kill us, Martinez pointed out. Some of us, Vasquez agreed. But, not all. And, the ones who survive would have a chance to escape. The plan was discussed quietly over several hours as the alien guards changed shift. The Zephyrians seemed to follow a precise schedule. Every 4 hours, the 2 sentries would be replaced by fresh guards. During the changeover, there was a brief window where the prison level was unmonitored except by automated systems. Chen found himself thinking about Earth, about the blue skies and warm sunshine he might never see again. The human colonies in this sector were scattered and poorly defended. If the Zephyrian Empire decided to expand into human space, there would be little to stop them. Someone needed to escape, to warn the Colonial Defense Force about the alien threat. As the hours passed, word of the escape plan spread through the cell block. Volunteers stepped forward, men and women who understood they were likely signing their own death warrants but were willing to die if it meant others might live. It was a very human response to impossible odds, the kind of selfless courage that had carried their species to the stars. The Zephyrians had clearly never encountered anything like it. When the guard change began, Chen positioned himself at his cell's energy barrier. Around him, 23 other humans did the same. They had no way to synchronize their actions precisely, but they had agreed on a signal. When Chen gave the word, they would all grab the barriers simultaneously. The first pair of guards glided past, their attention focused on the corridor ahead. The second pair hadn't yet arrived. Chen could see Dr. Vasquez's hands trembling as she prepared to sacrifice herself for the others' freedom. Sergeant Torres was whispering what sounded like a prayer. Martinez caught Chen's eye through her barrier and nodded grimly. Now, Chen said quietly. 24 humans grabbed electromagnetic barriers designed to contain beings half their electrical capacity. The feedback was immediate and devastating. Chen felt every nerve in his body light up like a supernova as impossible voltages coursed through him. He heard screaming, some of it his own, as bodies convulsed and fell. But Dr. Vasquez had been right. The local power grid couldn't handle the sudden surge. Emergency lights flickered as barriers winked out of existence. Chen lay on the cell floor, muscles spasming, but alive and free. Around him, 11 other humans were stirring. The rest lay motionless. Go, gasped Torres from where he had fallen. The Marine was badly burned but conscious. Before backup power kicks in. Chen struggled to his feet, fighting waves of nausea and disorientation. Martinez was moving, as was Vasquez, though the scientist's hair was singed and her hands were badly burned. They had perhaps minutes before the Zephyrians discovered the breakout. The escaped humans moved quickly through corridors carved from the same luminescent stone as their prison. The palace was vast, a crystalline maze that stretched for kilometers in all directions. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows as they climbed service stairs toward what they hoped were the upper levels. This way, whispered Martinez, who had managed to retain a small tablet she had hidden from the guards. She had been mapping their route to and from interrogation sessions for weeks. The launch bays should be in the northern wing. They moved like ghosts through the alien palace, 12 humans against an empire of billions. Behind them, alarms began to sound as the Zephyrians discovered the escape. The aliens' melodic voices rose in what could only be anger and confusion. None of them could understand how primitive beings had overcome their advanced containment systems. As they climbed higher into the palace structure, Chen began to see the true scope of their situation. Through crystal windows, he glimpsed the Zephyrian capital city stretching to the horizon, spires of living crystal that pulsed with internal light, aerial platforms where graceful aliens moved in perfect harmony. It was beautiful and utterly alien, a civilization that had reached heights humanity could barely imagine. And, yet they had underestimated the species they had captured. the group reached what appeared to be a maintenance level when they encountered their first guard. The Zephyrian was tall and elegant, carrying a weapon that looked like crystallized lightning. It saw them and opened its mouth to sound an alarm. Sergeant Torres hit the alien like a linebacker tackling a quarterback. The two went down hard, the Zephyrian's weapon skittering across the crystal floor. Torres was weakened from the electrical trauma but still possessed human strength and desperation. The alien, for all its grace and advanced technology, had never been in a physical fight with a species that had evolved from persistence predators. "Move," Torres grunted as he secured the alien weapon. "More will be coming." They continued through the palace, now armed and increasingly confident. The Zephyrians were advanced, but they were also predictable. Their society seemed to operate on protocols and procedures that left little room for improvisation. Humans, on the other hand, specialized in adapting to unexpected situations. As they approached the launch bay level, Chen began to formulate a larger plan. Escape was only the first step. If they could reach human space, they could warn the colonies about the Zephyrian threat. But, more importantly, they could carry word that the seemingly invincible alien empire was not as untouchable as it appeared. The Zephyrians had made a critical error in keeping humans alive to study. They had given their enemies time to observe, to learn, and to plan. In trying to understand human psychology for their conquest plans, they had provided humans with invaluable intelligence about their own weaknesses. Queen Vexhari the Eternal was about to learn why humanity had survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, and 2 world wars. She was about to discover that the species she considered primitive possessed something her advanced civilization had lost along the way, the ability to turn desperation into strength and impossible odds into opportunity. The escaped humans reached the launch bay as palace security began to converge on their location. Through the transparent aluminum windows, they could see dozens of Zephyrian scout ships, sleek vessels designed for speed and stealth rather than combat. If they could steal one and reach the edge of the system, they might be able to jump to hyperspace before being intercepted. "Can anyone fly one of those things?" Chen asked as plasma bolts began striking the corridor behind them. Dr. Vasquez smiled grimly. "How hard can it be? They're designed for beings who think in predictable patterns. We just have to be unpredictable." It was perhaps the most human response possible. Faced with incomprehensible alien technology, their first instinct was to figure out how to steal it and make it work better than its creators had intended. The Zephyrian Empire was about to learn why humanity had earned its reputation as the galaxy's most dangerous species. The real question was whether Queen Vexhari would learn the lesson before it was too late for her empire to survive the encounter. The stolen Zephyrian scout ship Whisper of Stars cut through hyperspace like a blade through silk, its alien propulsion systems pushing far beyond their intended specifications. Captain Marcus Chen sat in the pilot's chair, his burned hands gripping controls designed for graceful fingers with too many joints. 3 weeks had passed since their escape from the Imperial Palace, and the ship's stolen navigation systems showed they were finally approaching human space. "Picking up Colonial Defense Force transmissions," announced Lieutenant Martinez from the communications console. She had managed to decode the Zephyrian interface through pure stubborn determination and an engineer's intuition for how systems worked. "Looks like Fleet Command is coordinating a major operation in the Centauri sector." Chen felt his stomach tighten. The Centauri colonies housed nearly 2 million humans across 17 worlds. If the Zephyrians were targeting that sector, the casualties would be devastating. "Can you reach them directly?" "Working on it," Martinez replied, her fingers dancing across holographic controls that shifted and flowed like liquid light. "The Zephyrian communication array is more advanced than anything we have, but it operates on quantum frequencies that human equipment can't normally access." In the 3 weeks since their escape, the 12 survivors had learned more about their captors than human intelligence had gathered in decades of border skirmishes. The Zephyrian Empire wasn't just technologically advanced, they were fundamentally different in how they approached warfare, diplomacy, and expansion. Dr. Elena Vasquez looked up from the alien database she had been studying. "I've been analyzing their tactical files. The Zephyrians don't fight wars the way we understand them. They prefer psychological warfare, economic manipulation, and gradual assimilation. Direct military conflict is considered crude and inefficient. Which explains why they kept us alive, added Sergeant Torres from where he was examining captured Zephyrian weapons. They wanted to understand human psychology before beginning their conquest. Study the enemy, then break them without firing a shot. Chen nodded grimly. It was an elegant strategy for a species that valued efficiency above all else. The Zephyrians would infiltrate human colonies, identify key leaders and infrastructure, then apply precise pressure to force surrender. No messy battles, no destroyed resources, just smooth conquest followed by gradual integration into their empire. The only problem was that their strategy depended on humans behaving predictably. Captain, Martinez called out urgently. I'm reading massive gravitational distortions in the Centauri sector. Something big is happening. Chen moved to the sensor station, though the alien readouts were still largely incomprehensible to him. What he could understand made his blood run cold. The displays showed dozens of large objects dropping out of hyperspace near the outer colonies, Zephyrian dreadnoughts, each one capable of reducing a planet to ash. They're not here to invade, Chen realized. They're here to demonstrate. Show the colonies what happens to species that don't surrender voluntarily. The Zephyrians had clearly studied human history and concluded that humanity's greatest weakness was their emotional attachment to civilian populations. A few well-placed atrocities would break human resistance more effectively than years of conventional warfare. They had made one critical miscalculation. Martinez, can you patch us through to Colonial Defense Command? Chen asked. Use all available frequencies, quantum and conventional. I don't care if it gives away our position. Already on it, Captain. Broadcasting on all channels now. Chen activated the ship's recording system, knowing that this message might be his last official act as a Terran colonial officer. This is Captain Marcus Chen of the mining vessel Perseverance, transmitting aboard a captured Zephyrian scout ship. We have escaped from Imperial custody and carry critical intelligence about enemy capabilities and intentions. He paused, choosing his words carefully. The Zephyrian Empire has been studying human psychology in preparation for conquest. They believe they understand us. They believe that fear will make us surrender, that civilian casualties will break our will to fight. They are about to discover why every species in the galaxy knows never to corner a human with nothing left to lose. The transmission took several minutes to reach Colonial Defense Command, but the response came back almost immediately. Admiral Sarah Chen, his sister, he realized with a shock, appeared on the main viewer, her face haggard with stress and exhaustion. Marcus? My God, we thought you were dead. The Zephyrians announced they had executed all prisoners 3 weeks ago. Psychological warfare, Admiral. They wanted you to believe we were gone to demoralize the colonies. Chen quickly outlined what they had learned about Zephyrian tactics and capabilities. They're not here to conquer, Sarah. They're here to terrify. Break human morale with a show of overwhelming force, then offer surrender as the only alternative to extinction. Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried the steel that had made her one of humanity's finest military commanders. How many ships are we facing? 47 dreadnoughts, over 300 escort vessels. But, Admiral, their entire strategy depends on humans responding rationally to superior force. They don't understand that humans don't surrender when cornered, we get angry. Through the quantum link, Chen could see his sister's expression shift from despair to something approaching savage satisfaction. Marcus, I want you to transmit everything you've learned about Zephyrian technology to Fleet Command. Every technical specification, every tactical analysis, everything. Sarah, what are you planning? Something the Zephyrians won't expect. Something no rational species would attempt. Admiral Chen's smile was all predator. Marcus, how would you like to help your little sister teach an empire what humans do when someone threatens their families? Over the next 6 hours, the stolen Zephyrian scout ship became the nerve center for one of the most audacious military operations in human history. Dr. Vasquez's technical analysis revealed critical weaknesses in Zephyrian shield technology, while Sergeant Torres identified tactical blind spots in their defensive formations. Martinez established quantum communication links that allowed real-time coordination between scattered colonial defense forces. But it was Chen's psychological insights that proved most valuable. The Zephyrians expected humans to respond to their demonstration of force with either immediate surrender or desperate, disorganized resistance. They had positioned their fleet to maximize psychological impact while minimizing their own risk, a perfect formation for intimidation that left them vulnerable to unconventional attacks. "They're treating this like a parade, not a battle," Chen observed as he studied the enemy formation. "Look at their positioning, every ship arranged for maximum visual impact from the colony worlds. They want the civilians to see their overwhelming power and demand surrender from their governments." Admiral Chen's voice crackled through the quantum link from her flagship Indomitable. "Then, let's give them a parade they'll never forget. All units, execute Operation Wildfire." What happened next would be studied in military academies across human space for generations. The Colonial Defense Force had been outnumbered nearly 10-1, but they possessed something the Zephyrians couldn't quantify: the human capacity for inspired madness in the face of impossible odds. The attack began with what appeared to be a desperate charge by human fighters toward the center of the Zephyrian formation. The aliens responded predictably, their escort vessels moving to intercept while the dreadnoughts maintained their intimidating formation. It looked like suicide, exactly the kind of emotional, irrational response the Zephyrians had expected from a primitive species. Right up until the fighters revealed themselves to be cargo haulers packed with fusion warheads. The Zephyrians had never encountered kamikaze tactics. Their culture valued efficiency and preservation of resources above all else. The idea of deliberately sacrificing valuable assets for tactical advantage was literally inconceivable to them. By the time they understood what was happening, 12 nuclear detonations had collapsed their forward shield grid and disabled 6 dreadnoughts. But the real attack came from behind. While the Zephyrians focused on the dramatic frontal assault, human ships that had been powered down and drifting like debris came alive throughout their formation. Destroyers and cruisers that the aliens had dismissed as battle damage suddenly opened fire at point-blank range with every weapon they possessed. "The Zephyrians fight like they're conducting an orchestra," Chen observed as the battle unfolded on his screens. "Perfect coordination, elegant formations, everything in harmony. But humans fight like a jazz band, pure improvisation and individual brilliance somehow creating something beautiful." The Zephyrian response was swift but predictable. Their remaining dreadnoughts began to withdraw into defensive formations while escort vessels attempted to screen their retreat. It was a rational, efficient response that minimized casualties while preserving the core fleet. It was also exactly what Admiral Chen had anticipated. "All units, initiate Phase 2, came the order from Indomitable. Show them what happens when you threaten a human colony." Chen watched in awe as the Colonial Defense Force revealed the true scope of their trap. What had appeared to be a desperate last stand was actually the opening movement of a carefully orchestrated campaign. Human ships emerged from asteroid fields, sensor shadows, and hyperspace jump points throughout the system, not just military vessels, but civilian freighters, mining ships, and colony transports, all armed with improvised weapons and crewed by volunteers. "My God," whispered Dr. Vasquez from her position at the sensor console. "The entire colonial population is joining the fight." It was true. Across 17 worlds, humans had abandoned their normal routines to participate in the defense of their homes. Orbital mining platforms had been converted into weapons platforms. Civilian space stations were launching improvised missiles. Even planetary-based installations were contributing, their industrial fabricators working around the clock to produce ammunition and spare parts for the fleet. The Zephyrians had expected to face a military force. Instead, they were fighting an entire civilization. "This is impossible," came a transmission from the Zephyrian flagship, its melodic alien language translated by the scout ship's computers. "No rational species commits its entire population to warfare. The casualties will be catastrophic." Admiral Chen's response was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring every Zephyrian vessel could hear it. "You're right, it is impossible. But you made one critical error in your calculations. You assumed humans are rational." Chen felt a fierce pride as he watched his species do what it had always done when faced with extinction: adapt, improvise, and fight with everything they possessed. The Zephyrians had superior technology, better training, and overwhelming numerical advantages. But, they had never encountered a species that treated impossible odds as merely an interesting challenge. As the battle raged, Chen began to understand that this was more than just a military engagement. This was humanity announcing to the galaxy that they were not going to be conquered quietly. Every alien empire that had dismissed humans as primitive savages was about to receive a very unpleasant education. The Zephyrian fleet was in full retreat now, their elegant formations shattered by human unpredictability. But, Chen knew this was only the beginning. Queen Vexhari the Eternal would not accept defeat gracefully. She would respond with escalation, bringing the full might of her empire to bear against the colonies. "Admiral," Chen transmitted to his sister. "They'll be back with everything they have. This was just their opening move." "I know," Admiral Chen replied. "But, now they know we're not going to roll over and surrender." "And, Marcus? You and your team have given us something more valuable than intelligence. You've given us hope." Looking around the bridge of the stolen Zephyrian ship, Chen saw what his sister meant. Dr. Vasquez was already working on improvements to the alien technology, finding ways to make their own systems more efficient. Sergeant Torres was analyzing Zephyrian weapons and armor, identifying weaknesses that could be exploited. Martinez was studying their communication protocols, learning how to intercept and disrupt enemy coordination. 12 humans had escaped from an impregnable prison, stolen advanced alien technology, and helped coordinate the defense of an entire star system. If they could accomplish all that, what could humanity achieve when it really put its mind to something? Queen Vexhari was about to find out. Queen Vexhari the Eternal stood in the center of her crystalline war room, her silver eyes reflecting the holographic displays that showed the extent of her empire's humiliation. 47 dreadnoughts, the pride of her fleet, had limped back to Zephyrian space with their elegant hulls scarred by human weapons and their crew's confidence shattered by an enemy that refused to follow the established rules of galactic warfare. The queen was tall even by Zephyrian standards, her pale blue skin marked with the intricate patterns that denoted her royal lineage. For over 3 centuries, she had guided her empire's expansion with calculated precision, absorbing 17 different species through a combination of psychological warfare, economic manipulation, and overwhelming technological superiority. Not once had she encountered resistance that couldn't be overcome through logical application of force. The humans were proving to be disappointingly irrational. "Explain to me again how a mining vessel crew managed to escape from maximum security containment," she commanded, her melodic voice carrying harmonics that could induce terror in most species. The Zephyrians standing around the war room's perimeter shifted uncomfortably, her displeasure was a tangible force that made the air itself seem to vibrate with menace. Admiral Kethmore, commander of the failed Centauri expedition, stepped forward with the graceful movements characteristic of his species. "Your Majesty, the humans employed a technique we had not anticipated. They deliberately injured themselves to overload our containment systems, sacrificing individual safety for collective advantage." "And, you found this surprising?" Queen Vexhari's psychic abilities allowed her to probe the emotions of those around her, tasting their fear and uncertainty like fine wine. "Our intelligence reports specifically noted human propensity for self-sacrifice. Did you not account for this in your security protocols?" Admiral Kethmore's elegant features showed the strain of having disappointed his queen. "Your Majesty, our psychologists determined that such behavior, while documented, was limited to extreme circumstances involving protection of offspring or genetic relatives. The prisoners were strangers from different ships and backgrounds. There was no logical basis for mutual sacrifice." The Queen moved to the central holographic display, studying the tactical analysis of the Centauri battle. The humans had fought with a ferocity that bordered on insanity, throwing their entire civilization into combat against impossible odds. Even more disturbing was their apparent enjoyment of the conflict. Intercepted communications showed human pilots laughing as they performed suicide attacks, colonial militias singing battle songs while charging Zephyrian positions. "They enjoyed it," she observed aloud. "Our species developed beyond the need for warfare millennia ago. We fight when necessary, efficiently and without emotion. These humans seem to view combat as entertainment." "Perhaps that is their weakness, Your Majesty," suggested Intelligence Minister Yixandra from her position near the quantum communication arrays. "If they are addicted to violence, we could exploit this compulsion." turn their aggression against themselves. Queen Vexhari considered the proposal. The Zephyrian Empire had successfully conquered warrior cultures before, usually by identifying their key leaders and either corrupting or eliminating them. But the human response to leadership losses had been characteristically unpredictable. Instead of surrender, they simply promoted new leaders from the ranks and continued fighting with undiminished enthusiasm. "What is the current status of their defenses?" the Queen asked. Admiral Kethmore activated a star chart showing human space in remarkable detail. Intelligence indicates they are fortifying every major colony and establishing new defensive positions throughout their territory. Their industrial capacity has been completely converted to military production. Most concerning, they appear to be reverse engineering our technology at an unprecedented rate. The Queen studied the display with growing unease. Zephyrian technology was supposed to be incomprehensible to primitive species. Their quantum crystalline matrices required centuries of theoretical advancement to understand. Yet human engineers were apparently treating them like particularly interesting puzzles to be solved through trial and error. How is this possible? Their technological base is millennia behind ours. Your Majesty, Intelligence Minister Yixandra stepped forward with visible reluctance. Our analysis suggests that humans approach problems differently than other species. Where we develop comprehensive theoretical frameworks before attempting practical applications, they appear to experiment directly with unknown systems until they achieve desired results. That would be incredibly inefficient. The casualty rates alone should discourage such methods. According to our observations, humans consider experimentation-related casualties an acceptable cost for rapid advancement. They appear to view the death of researchers as valuable data rather than deterrent. Queen Vexhari felt something she had not experienced in centuries: uncertainty. Every species her empire had encountered followed logical patterns of behavior that could be predicted and exploited. The humans seemed to operate according to principles that made no rational sense, yet somehow achieved effective results. "What intelligence do we have on their current leadership structure?" she asked. "Fragmented and constantly changing," Admiral Kethmore replied with evident frustration. "They appear to have abandoned formal command hierarchies in favor of what they call mission-type orders. Local commanders are given objectives and allowed to achieve them through any means they consider appropriate. But that would lead to complete chaos. No civilization can function without centralized coordination. That is what our strategic models predicted, Your Majesty. However, human forces appear to thrive on improvisation and independent action. Their lack of rigid command structure makes them nearly impossible to predict or counter effectively." The Queen moved to her throne, a crystalline construct that amplified her psychic abilities and allowed her to commune with the collective consciousness of her empire. Through quantum entanglement, she could touch the minds of billions of Zephyrians across hundreds of worlds, accessing their combined knowledge and wisdom. What she found was unprecedented. For the first time in imperial history, her people were afraid. The fear was not based on military casualties or territorial losses, though both had been significant. Instead, it stemmed from a fundamental challenge to everything the Zephyrian Empire understood about warfare, diplomacy, and the nature of intelligent species. The humans were rewriting the basic rules that had governed galactic civilization for millions of years. Your Majesty, Intelligence Minister Yixandra approached the throne with a data crystal in her hands. "We have intercepted human communications that may provide insight into their strategic intentions." The Queen accepted the crystal and interfaced it with her throne's systems. Human voices filled the war room, their harsh language translated by quantum linguistic matrices into comprehensible Zephyrian. "This is Admiral Saracen broadcasting to all colonial defense forces. The enemy has retreated, but this is only the beginning. They came here expecting us to surrender in the face of superior technology. They learned that humans don't surrender, we adapt. Every weapon they brought, we will copy and improve. Every tactic they employed, we will study and counter. They wanted to conquer us. Instead, they have given us the tools and motivation to bring their empire down." The transmission continued with detailed technical discussions that made Queen Vexhari's psychic essence recoil in shock. The humans were not content with defensive victory, they were planning offensive operations against Zephyrian territory. More disturbing, they were discussing their enemy's technology with casual confidence, as if reverse engineering equipment millennia ahead of their development was merely an interesting technical challenge. They cannot be serious, the Queen said aloud. Our empire spans 3 galactic spiral arms. We have conquered species with technology far superior to theirs. They are talking about attacking us with weapons we designed. Your Majesty, Admiral Kethmore's voice carried a note of barely controlled panic. Our latest intelligence reports indicate they have already begun field testing improved versions of our plasma weapons. Their modifications are crude but effective. They have increased destructive power by 17% while reducing energy consumption by 12%. The Queen felt her certainty cracking like fractured crystal. How? They removed what they call unnecessary safety features and optimized the quantum matrices for maximum output rather than operational longevity. A captured human engineer described our original designs as over-engineered and too worried about user safety. It was an accurate assessment that somehow made the situation even more disturbing. Zephyrian technology was indeed designed with multiple safety systems and operational safeguards to prevent accidents. The humans had apparently identified these features as limitations to be overcome rather than protections to be maintained. What casualties did they sustain during these experiments? The Queen asked. According to intercepted medical reports, approximately 40% of their weapons research team has been injured or killed during the modification process. They consider this an acceptable loss rate and have established what they call expendable research protocols to accelerate development. Queen Vexhari rose from her throne and moved to the vast windows that offered a view of the imperial capital. Below her stretched a perfect city of crystalline spires and flowing organic architecture, home to millions of Zephyrians who had never known defeat or uncertainty. How could she explain to them that their empire was being challenged by a species that treated death as a research methodology? Your Majesty, Intelligence Minister Yixandra approached with obvious reluctance. There is additional information you should know. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected human scout ships in 7 different sectors. They appear to be conducting reconnaissance operations throughout our territory. The Queen turned back to the holographic display, studying the locations where human vessels had been spotted. The pattern was disturbing in its implications. The humans were not randomly exploring Zephyrian space. They were systematically mapping critical infrastructure, military installations, and command centers. They are preparing for a comprehensive assault, she realized. But their fleet was essentially destroyed in the Centauri engagement. What vessels are they using for these operations? That is the most concerning aspect, Your Majesty. Analysis of sensor readings indicates they are flying modified versions of our own ships. The vessels appear to be heavily armed with hybrid human Zephyrian weapons systems. The truth hit Queen Vexhari like a psychic shockwave. The humans had not just reverse-engineered captured technology, they had improved it. They were using Zephyrian ships and weapons against their creators, but the modified systems were actually superior to the originals. How many ships have they stolen or captured? She demanded. Intelligence estimates suggest they have acquired nearly 300 vessels of various classes over the past month. They appear to be using modified Zephyrian ships to capture additional Zephyrian ships in an accelerating cycle. And our response? Admiral Kethmore exchanged glances with the intelligence minister before responding. Your Majesty, our patrol fleets have standing orders to avoid engagement with human forces until we can develop effective countermeasures. Current tactical doctrine classifies humans as a Class 7 adaptive threat. Extreme caution required for all interactions. Queen Vexhari felt rage building in her psychic core. Her empire had spent 3 centuries perfecting the art of bloodless conquest, expanding through careful application of overwhelming force that left enemies no rational choice but surrender. The humans had responded to overwhelming force by stealing her weapons and using them more effectively than her own people. Summon the War Council, she commanded. Every admiral, every intelligence chief, every strategic analyst in the empire. I want comprehensive plans for the total elimination of the human species within 30 standard cycles. Your Majesty, Intelligence Minister Yixandra spoke carefully, our projections suggest that conventional military operations may not be sufficient. Human adaptability and their apparent disregard for casualties make them extremely difficult to counter through traditional warfare. Then, we will use unconventional warfare, the Queen replied, her voice carrying harmonics that made the crystalline walls of the war room vibrate in sympathy. We will deploy every weapon in our arsenal, including those we have kept in reserve for ultimate emergencies. If the humans want to rewrite the rules of galactic warfare, we will teach them why those rules existed in the first place. As her subordinates rushed to implement her orders, Queen Vexhari remained at the windows, staring out at her perfect capital city. For the first time in her long life, she found herself wondering if perfection was actually a weakness. The Zephyrian Empire had evolved beyond the need for adaptation and innovation. They had achieved optimal efficiency in all aspects of civilization. The humans, by contrast, seemed to thrive on chaos and constant change. They treated every challenge as an opportunity for improvement, every setback as a learning experience. It was an exhausting way to live, but it made them nearly impossible to defeat through conventional means. Perhaps it was time for the Zephyrian Empire to remember what it had been like before they achieved perfection. Perhaps it was time to show the humans what happened when a truly advanced civilization decided to abandon restraint and fight for survival. The Queen smiled, and, for the first time since the Centauri defeat, she felt confident about the future. The humans had awakened something in the Zephyrian Empire that had been dormant for millennia, the capacity for ruthless, total warfare. They were about to learn why her species had conquered the galaxy in the first place. Captain Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the hybrid warship Human Defiance, watching Zephyrian space patrol vessels flee at the sight of his approaching fleet. 6 months had passed since his escape from the Imperial Palace, and the war between humanity and the Zephyrian Empire had escalated beyond anything either species had anticipated. The Human Defiance itself was a perfect example of how the conflict had evolved. Built around the hull of a captured Zephyrian dreadnought, it had been completely redesigned by human engineers who treated alien technology like components in the galaxy's most dangerous construction project. Quantum crystalline matrices powered conventional fusion reactors, Zephyrian plasma conduits fed energy to magnetic railguns, and the entire ship was controlled by a hybrid computer system that combined alien efficiency with human intuition. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Martinez from the sensor station. "Long-range scans are picking up massive energy signatures from the Zephyrian homeworld. Something big is powering up." Chen moved to study the displays, though after months of working with modified alien interfaces, he could read them almost as easily as human readouts. What he saw made his stomach clench with apprehension. The energy patterns were unlike anything they had encountered, not the elegant, contained power signatures typical of Zephyrian technology, but something raw and primal. "They're activating ancient systems," observed Dr. Elena Vasquez from the engineering station. "These readings suggest technology that's been dormant for thousands of years. The power levels are off the charts." Sergeant Torres looked up from the tactical console where he had been tracking Zephyrian fleet movements. "Whatever they're planning, it's big. We're detecting similar energy spikes throughout their core territories. They're mobilizing everything they have." Chen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the bridge's environmental controls. For 6 months, humanity had been winning through superior adaptability and willingness to take risks that other species considered insane. They had captured ships, stolen technology, and turned the Zephyrians' own weapons against them with devastating effectiveness. But they had also been fighting against an enemy that was holding back. "Martinez, open a quantum channel to Admiral Chen and Colonial Command. Priority Alpha encryption." Chen waited for the connection to establish, then faced the holographic image of his sister that materialized above the communication console. "Marcus, thank God you're alive," Admiral Sarachin said immediately. "We've been tracking massive energy buildups throughout Zephyrian space. Our analysis teams are completely baffled by what they're seeing. Sarah, I think the Zephyrians have been playing with us. Everything we've faced so far, their dreadnoughts, their weapons, their tactics, it's all been their equivalent of police action. They've been trying to conquer us without damaging the resources they wanted to acquire." Admiral Chen's expression grew grim. "You're saying they've been holding back?" "I'm saying they've been treating us like a minor rebellion to be suppressed with minimal force." "But, now." Chen gestured to the sensor readings showing energy patterns that dwarfed anything they had previously encountered. "Now I think they're getting serious." Dr. Vasquez moved to the central display, her fingers dancing over alien controls as she brought up historical data they had recovered from captured Zephyrian computers.
Captain, I've been analyzing their Imperial records for months.
The Zephyrian Empire has been around for over 50,000 years. In all that time, they've only faced 3 conflicts serious enough to require full military mobilization.
What happened to their opponents? Chen asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Total extinction.
Not just military defeat, complete erasure of their civilizations, their planets, even their historical records.
The Zephyrians call it Imperial Cleansing Protocol.
When they decide a species is too dangerous to be allowed to exist, they don't just conquer them. They remove every trace that they ever existed.
The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in.
Chen thought about the human colonies scattered across dozens of worlds, the billions of people who were depending on their military forces to protect them from alien conquest. If the Zephyrians were truly mobilizing their ancient weapons, conventional defense might not be possible.
Martinez, can you analyze those energy signatures more closely?
I want to know exactly what we're facing. Martinez worked with the intensity she had shown during their escape from the Imperial Palace, her engineering background allowing her to interpret readings that would have baffled most military officers. After several minutes, her face went pale.
Captain, these aren't just weapons.
The Zephyrians are activating planetary annihilation devices. Each energy signature corresponds to a system capable of destroying entire star systems.
How many? Chen asked quietly. 17 confirmed signatures so far.
And, Captain, they're all aimed at human space.
The reality of their situation hit Chen like a physical blow.
Humanity had been celebrating their victories against Zephyrian patrol fleets and occupation forces, but they had been fighting the alien equivalent of mall security. Now the real military was mobilizing, and it possessed weapons that could literally erase human civilization from existence.
Sarah, Chen said to his sister's holographic image. You need to evacuate every human colony immediately. Whatever those ancient weapons are, they're designed to eliminate entire species.
Evacuate to where?
Admiral Chan replied grimly.
Marcus, we're talking about over 4 billion people scattered across 87 worlds. We don't have the ships or the time to relocate everyone, and there's nowhere in human space that would be safe from weapons with that much destructive power.
Chen stared at the tactical display, watching red icons representing Zephyrian superweapons continue to multiply throughout their empire.
In 6 months of warfare, humanity had learned to adapt, to steal alien technology, and to win through superior desperation.
But adaptation required time, and they might only have hours before Queen Vexhari unleashed forces that could crack planets like eggs. There might be another option, Dr. Vasquez said quietly from the engineering station. Captain, I've been studying the Imperial Cleansing Protocol in detail. The Zephyrians don't just activate these weapons randomly.
They follow a specific sequence designed to maximize psychological impact before physical destruction.
Meaning what?
They always target the homeworld last.
Queen Vexhari will want Earth's leaders to watch every human colony get annihilated before she destroys the birth world of our species. It's designed to break their spirit completely before the final blow. Torres looked up from his tactical analysis.
That gives us a window, but
not much of one. How long do we have? Based on the historical pattern, maybe 12 hours from first activation to Earthstrike. The question is whether we can do anything meaningful in that time.
Chen found himself thinking about the conversation he had overheard months ago between Zephyrian guards in the Imperial Palace. They had spoken about humanity with a mixture of contempt and confusion, unable to understand why humans refused to surrender in the face of superior force. Now Queen Vexhari was preparing to demonstrate just how superior that force could be. But she was still thinking like a Zephyrian. Martinez, Dr. Vasquez, I want a complete analysis of those energy signatures. Not just their destructive potential, but their operational characteristics. How do they work? What kind of infrastructure do they require? What are their weaknesses?
Captain, Torres interrupted. You can't be thinking about attacking those weapons.
We have maybe 50 ships in this fleet, and most of them are captured Zephyrian vessels with hybrid modifications. Those planetary annihilators are protected by the core defenses of the Empire.
Sergeant, what have we learned about the Zephyrians over the past 6 months? Torres considered the question carefully.
That they're predictable, technologically overconfident, and they have no experience dealing with enemies who don't follow rational tactical doctrine.
Exactly. And, what's the most irrational tactical decision we could possibly make right now? Understanding dawned on Torres's scarred features.
Attack their homeworld directly while they're powering up superweapons specifically designed to eliminate us. It's so crazy it might actually work, Martinez added from the sensor station. The Zephyrians are focusing their defenses on protecting those ancient weapons.
They probably assume we'll try to run or hide, not launch a direct assault on their capital. Chen activated the fleet-wide communication system, opening channels to every human ship in their task force. All vessels, this is Captain Chen. We've just learned that the Zephyrian Empire is activating planet-killer weapons aimed at every human world.
They expect us to retreat in terror or waste our time trying to evacuate civilians.
He paused, looking around the bridge at the faces of the people who had escaped with him from the Imperial Palace.
They had started this war as prisoners scheduled for execution. Now they were about to attempt something that would either save human civilization or get them all killed in the next few hours. Instead, we're going to do what humans do best when faced with impossible odds.
We're going to attack the problem head-on. All ships, set course for the Zephyrian homeworld. We're going to remind Queen Vexhari why cornering humans is always a mistake. The response from the fleet was immediate and enthusiastic.
Human crews who had spent months learning to fight with stolen alien technology now had a chance to test their innovations against the empire that had created those weapons in the first place. It was a suicide mission by any rational calculation, but rationality had never been humanity's strongest characteristic. As the human Defiance and its escort vessels jumped to hyperspace, Chen found himself thinking about the conversation he had had with Dr. Vasquez months earlier. She had said that humans approached problems differently than other species, experimenting directly with unknown systems until they achieved desired results. Queen Vexhari was about to discover that humans had been experimenting with more than just Zephyrian technology. They had been experimenting with warfare itself, developing new approaches to combat that no galactic empire had encountered before. The Zephyrian homeworld was about to become humanity's final examination, and failure meant the extinction of their entire species. But, as Chen watched his fleet emerge from hyperspace at the edge of the most heavily defended star system in the galaxy, he felt the same fierce confidence that had carried humans to the stars. They had come too far to surrender now. The real battle for humanity's survival was about to begin. The crystalline spires of the Zephyrian homeworld gleamed like frozen starlight against the cosmic void, their perfect geometries untouched by warfare for millennia. Queen Vexhari the Eternal stood in her highest tower, watching the activation sequence of weapons that could unmake entire civilizations. Soon, the human plague would be cleansed from the galaxy, and the natural order of Zephyrian supremacy would be restored. That was when 53 stolen Zephyrian vessels dropped out of hyperspace directly above the Imperial capital and opened fire on everything in sight. The attack was tactically insane. Human ships, most barely held together by improvised modifications and desperate engineering, were assaulting the most heavily defended location in the known galaxy. Defense platforms that could annihilate battle fleets engaged vessels that should have been destroyed instantly by their superior firepower. Instead, the human ships fought like nothing the galaxy had ever witnessed. Captain Markuschan stood on the bridge of the human Defiance as quantum plasma bolts seared the space around his ship. 6 months of desperate warfare had taught him and his crew to think in ways that no military academy could prepare for. They weren't following tactical doctrine because humans had essentially invented their own. Martinez route all available power to forward shields. I don't care if life support goes offline. Shen's order would have been considered criminally reckless by Zephyrian standards, but his crew implemented it without hesitation. Human ships began performing maneuvers that their alien designers had never intended, pushing systems beyond safe parameters in pursuit of tactical advantages. Captain, called Dr. Vasquez from the modified engineering station. I'm reading massive energy buildup from the planetary surface. Those ancient weapons are almost ready to fire. Through the bridge's crystalline windows, Chen could see the Zephyrian homeworld surface beginning to glow with eldritch energy. Geometric patterns kilometers wide were activating across continents, drawing power from the planet's core to fuel weapons that could sterilize entire star systems. The sight should have filled him with despair. Instead, he smiled. Torres, give me targeting solutions on those surface installations. Martinez, broadcast this message on all Zephyrian frequencies. Chen activated the communication system and spoke with the calm confidence of a man who had already accepted the impossible odds he faced. Queen Vexhari, this is Captain Marcus Chen of the human vessel Defiance. I want to thank you for keeping us alive in your prison 6 months ago. That was a mistake you're about to regret. The response came immediately. Queen Vexhari's melodic voice carried harmonics of rage and disbelief. Human! You dare attack the homeworld of the Eternal Empire? Your species will be extinct within hours. Your Majesty, Chen replied with mock politeness, you still don't understand what you're dealing with. You kept us alive to study us, to figure out how to break human psychology. But, you made a critical error in your analysis. The human Defiance dove toward the planetary surface, its hybrid human Zephyrian weapons carving through defense installations that had stood unconquered for thousands of years. Around it, the rest of the human fleet followed suit, each ship fighting with the desperate innovation that had become humanity's signature throughout the galaxy. You assumed, Chen continued as his ship's modified plasma cannons obliterated a weapons array the size of a city, that humans fight to win. That's not quite right. Humans fight because they refuse to lose. There's a difference. Queen Vexhari's psychic scream of fury actually cracked several crystal formations in the Imperial Palace. Your philosophical distinctions are irrelevant. I have weapons that can destroy stars. Your pathetic fleet cannot possibly. Her transmission cut off as the human Defiance and 3 other human vessels crashed through the palace's outer shields and began strafing the ancient weapon installations directly. The ships were taking devastating damage, but they continued their attack even as systems failed and crew members died at their posts. Dr. Vasquez, Chen called out as explosions rocked the bridge. How long until those planet killers are ready to fire? 7 minutes, Captain. But, Marcus. Her voice carried a note of wonder as she studied her readings. I think I understand what you're doing. You're not trying to stop the weapons. You're trying to overload them. Chen nodded grimly. The Zephyrians built those systems for precision strikes against distant targets. They never considered what would happen if someone was crazy enough to damage the control systems while they were charging. Across the human fleet, similar realizations were dawning. Ships that should have been fleeing the overwhelming defensive fire instead dove deeper into the planetary atmosphere, their crews working with the focused intensity of people who knew they were writing the final chapter of their species' story. All vessels, Chen broadcast on the human command frequency. You know what we're here to do. Those weapons represent 50,000 years of Zephyrian technological advancement. Let's show them what 6 months of human engineering can accomplish. What happened next would be studied by xenoarchaeologists for generations, assuming any species survived to study it. Human ships, jury-rigged with technology they barely understood, began implementing modifications to Zephyrian superweapons in real time. Dr. Vasquez's voice echoed across the command channel as she directed engineering teams through procedures that should have taken years to develop. Reroute the quantum crystalline matrices through your ship's power cores. Yes, it will probably kill you, but it will also create a feedback loop in the planetary weapon systems. Override the safety protocols on the plasma conduits. I know they'll overload, that's the point. When I give the signal, everyone activates their self-destruct sequences simultaneously. The combined quantum detonations should resonate with the charging weapons. On the surface of the Zephyrian homeworld, Queen Vexhari watched in growing horror as her perfect weapons began displaying error messages she had never seen before. The ancient systems, designed to annihilate distant enemies, were being sabotaged by those very enemies as they died. This is impossible, she whispered, her psychic abilities reaching out to touch the minds of the human attackers. What she found there shattered her understanding of intelligent behavior. The humans knew they were going to die. They had known it from the moment they entered the system. But, instead of despair or terror, their minds burned with fierce satisfaction. They were not just sacrificing themselves to save their species, they were taking pleasure in demonstrating that the mighty Zephyrian Empire could be hurt by people it considered primitives. Captain Chen, Queen Vexhari transmitted directly to the human Defiance, her voice carrying the full weight of her psychic power. I will make your death last for centuries. I will extract every moment of agony from your consciousness and, Your Majesty, Chen interrupted calmly as his ship's systems failed around him. With all due respect, you still don't get it. We're not afraid of dying. We're afraid of our children growing up as slaves. The human Defiance crashed into the primary control center for the ancient weapons just as Dr. Vasquez activated the quantum resonance cascade she had been preparing. Across the planetary surface, human ships followed suit, their deaths triggering precisely calculated explosions that turned the Zephyrian superweapons against their own power sources. Queen Vexhari felt her empire's greatest weapons tearing themselves apart as incomprehensible quantum forces rippled through their crystalline matrices. The feedback loop spread from installation to installation, each explosion triggering others in an accelerating cascade of destruction. No, she whispered as the readings showed the inevitable result. This cannot be happening. But it was. The human attack had achieved something no military strategist would have considered possible. They had turned the Zephyrian Empire's ultimate weapons into a planet-killing bomb aimed at the Empire's own homeworld. In the final moments before the quantum cascade reached critical mass, Queen Vexhari understood what Captain Chen had been trying to tell her. Humans didn't fight to win according to established rules of warfare. They fought to ensure that anyone who threatened their families would regret it, regardless of the cost to themselves. The explosion that consumed the Zephyrian homeworld was visible from 3 star systems away. When the energy dissipated, nothing remained but cosmic dust and a quantum scar in spacetime that would serve as a permanent memorial to the price of underestimating human determination. 3 days later, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, reading reports from Zephyrian territories throughout the galaxy. Without their queen and their homeworld, the Empire was collapsing into chaos. Species that had been conquered millennia ago were rising in rebellion, their oppressors suddenly revealed as mortal and fallible. Admiral, reported her communications officer. We're receiving surrender requests from over 300 Zephyrian military commanders. They're asking for protection from their former subjects. Admiral Chen considered the irony. The empire that had sought to conquer humanity was now begging for human protection from the civilizations it had enslaved. It was perhaps the most human possible outcome to an impossible situation. Offer them safe passage to neutral territories, she decided. But, make it clear that any future aggression against human space or our allies will be met with the full force of the colonial defense fleet. Across the galaxy, the news of humanity's victory spread with the speed of quantum transmissions. Species that had cowered before Zephyrian might for thousands of years suddenly found themselves free to determine their own destinies. The rigid order that had defined galactic civilization was crumbling, replaced by something messier but infinitely more hopeful. In the archives of a dozen different civilizations, historians began recording the legend of the human captain who had sacrificed himself and his crew to liberate an empire's worth of enslaved species. They wrote of how Marcus Chen and 53 ships had accomplished what armies numbering in the millions had failed to achieve. But they also recorded the deeper lesson that human beings, when backed into a corner with nothing left to lose, would find ways to win that no rational species would consider possible. It was a truth that would shape galactic politics for generations to come. Years later, when children across human space asked about the war against the Zephyrian Empire, their parents would tell them about the mining captain who became a legend. They would speak of how Marcus Chen proved that heroes are not born in palaces or military academies, but forged in the crucible of impossible choices and unwavering determination. And they would always end the story the same way: remember, when the darkness seems overwhelming and the odds appear impossible, that you carry within you the same spirit that brought down an empire. You are human. You do not surrender. You adapt, you overcome, and you make sure that anyone who threatens your family learns to regret it. The galaxy had learned to fear that lesson. More importantly, it had learned to respect it. In the end, Queen Vexhari had been right about one thing: Captain Marcus Chen had become a legend. She had simply been wrong about whose legend he would become.